This is your urgent call to action. We are all called to lead in a world in chaos, crisis, and turmoil. Join a pivotal global movement for change to transform the leadership crisis worldwide. Will you play it safe, or will you wake up, step up, and speak out? Like Nelson Mandela did for South Africa and the world, we need a radical new way to think, act, and lead, leading boldly into the future. Join host Anne Pratt, a Harvard Fellow and multi-awarded businesswoman, and unlock the best version of yourself to revolutionize leadership with what the world needs now.
Greetings to all you future bold leaders. Thank you for joining us from around the world. My name is Anne Pratt, formerly from South Africa, and relocated abroad to attend a Harvard Leadership Fellowship in Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States of America. Our bold leader joins us today from the multicultural city of Santa Fe in the state of New Mexico in the United States. He was born in Buenos Aires in Argentina, the son of a Polish refugee family that immigrated to the US when he was a child. He is a semi-retired educator and respected leader. He has taught and administered in private and public schools. He has taught and led in 2 international schools, including one in Santiago in Chile and the American School in Warsaw in Poland. He also founded and led 2 public schools in the city of Santa Fe in New Mexico. Stay with us as we explore and uncover the current systemic challenges facing not only public schools, but private schools in the United States. Why leaders today need to help balance and maintain a respected tension between the rights of individuals and the interests of communities, and how he very successfully adapted and transported a private school model in Denver, Colorado, when he founded and led 2 public schools in Santa Fe, New Mexico, including the International Baccalaureate, the Mandela International Magnet School in Santa Fe, which teaches Mandela's philosophy and leadership today. We warmly welcome Tony Gerlicz. Welcome to Leading Boldly into the Future. So Tony, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're sitting in Santa Fe. It's wonderful to be with you again.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, Anne.
That's awesome. Tony, you know, you've had such a wonderful life and career, of course, as officially a retired educator, but in fact, you're still so deeply involved in so many powerful and impactful initiatives. I thought a good starting point is, what has been the highlights of your career? You know, you've done public schools, you've done private schools, you've founded and led schools in the USA and in Warsaw, Poland, and of course in South America as well. What's been the highlight and why?
It's a difficult question to answer, really, because you're asking me to choose one highlight.
Yeah.
And I've had a blessed career, really. I've had, I could point to a number of things that I would call a highlight of my career. I would say that there are 3 highlights of equal import, and they're all sort of creations of mine. One is the creation of a not-for-profit called the Oregon Governor's School for Citizen Leadership, which I founded in 1991 in Portland, Oregon, for the state of Oregon. Yes. And then we had to move out of that state into other arenas. And when we arrived here in Santa Fe, I did find and start and lead 2 schools, public schools. The Monte del Sol Charter School in the year 2000 and the Mandela International Magnet School in the year 2014. I would say that those 3 creations I would lump into the basket of highlights. I've also been the director of school in Europe and also in South America. And those were always wonderful ventures as well. And I've done other things that are wonderful ventures, but the opportunity to create something out of nothing probably stands a bit taller than the other ones. So that's what I would say.
Well, that's such an interesting, I mean, such a diverse background. In your experience, Tony, this whole issue of education, and of course, education, not only in the world, but right here in America, this distinction between public schools and private schools. What do you think are the biggest systemic challenges within the public school system? And of course, then by contrast, in the private school system?
Well, there are challenges all over. I have had extensive experience in both arenas. I was a teacher in the private system at some very exclusive private schools. I
Mhm.
was an administrator at some exclusive private schools, the head of an upper school in Denver, Colorado. And I've been an administrator in the public system as well as the international system. So there are challenges to all.
Mhm.
Um, let's see. I think systemically, I'll talk about the private system first, which
Okay.
has enormous advantages over the public system.
Mhm.
Yes, they have to be certified as legitimate schools by the states in which they're in, but they have far more leeway about how to deliver that curriculum. They can be exclusive in who goes to their schools. They can be exclusive about who exits their schools. They generally are much better resourced schools. So
Mhm.
they have enormous advantages.
Mhm.
The disadvantages that I have seen in the private system is that they don't educate the reality of America's children. 90% of America's children are educated in the public system. And therefore lies the enormous challenges in the public system. We educate everybody,
Yeah.
as we should. That
Yes.
is a high ethical goal, and
Yes.
bring it on, because that's what a healthy society does. They
Yeah.
educate everyone,
Yeah.
as opposed to the private systems, which can be exclusive in who they choose to educate and who they don't. So it'd be easy for me to say, well, the public school system just needs a lot more money to be efficient. And that is always true.
Mhm.
But I would say that the public system also needs less sort of stringent regulation. And that's a tricky one.
Mhm.
That's a very, very delicate balance to quote. Having started a public school, a public charter school,
Yeah.
I chafed often at the mountain of state regulations and the mountain of federal regulations that I needed to comply with in
Mhm.
order to run the school, at the same time that we wanted to create a dynamic, innovative, different model of education. We
Mhm.
still had to meet all of these standards. And that was extremely challenging. And many times I would wonder, all these regulations, are they really necessary? And that's
Yeah.
on the negative side.
Mhm.
And on the positive side, let's say we had a public school system without those regulations. Then you run into the difficulty of what has happened in this country and probably still does.
Mhm.
That is, some areas of the country that say, well, the heck with it. We're not going to educate the students with special needs. We're not going to educate poverty kids who come with zero skills,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. And they may get away, their kids could easily fall through the cracks. So I understand the need for regulation so that children do not fall through the cracks and everyone is educated.
Yeah.
But I do think there needs to be a robust conversation about what's the proper balance between that level of regulation and not. Lastly, I would say one of the hugest difference, in addition to private schools being able to decide who they want to educate and who they don't want to educate,
Yeah.
they also educate, in my experience, in very, very ideal scenarios, environments. Their classes are much smaller.
Yeah.
They're much more capable of nimble of adapting their instruction to the individual since they teach far fewer kids, as they should. And
Hmm.
that's a lesson that the public school system could really learn
Hmm.
from the private system.
Hmm.
I think public school teachers are saints in our society. And having experienced that, where you're teaching 30 students in a class with a wide range of abilities and differences, and a wide range of parental and socioeconomic backgrounds, it's extraordinarily challenging. And you do that times five, 150 kids a day. There's no one in the world that could give that level of individual attention to all of those kids. So that's clearly something the public system could gain from the private system if the funding and the resources and the will was there.
Well, that's a wonderful segue, because one of the debates, the raging debates, is this divide in terms of how the way the system works in terms of the allocation of funds to private and public schools. And so from your perspective and with your experience, what do you think could be redesigned in the system to address this built-in divide in terms of the distribution of resources to help these public schools get additional funding to improve the quality of education, the class sizes, etc.?
Well, if I had the right answer, I'm sure I could get nominated to be Secretary of Education. So I don't think I have the answer, and I don't think there is the answer. There's a bucket of things that need to happen. I do remember, and I don't have the exact date or specifics on this, but the state of California did mandate that they would have smaller class sizes, and
Yeah.
they put that in their legislation. And consequently, what happened is that the need for increased funding from the legislature had to occur in order for California to meet that regulation. That is a good thing. The
Okay.
other thing I would say is that I do think public schools get far too much of a bad rap.
Yeah.
Those people that tend to criticize what happens in public schools often have never spent time in public schools and
Yes.
don't see the magic that teachers cause every single day under some pretty adverse conditions.
Hmm.
And that needs to be recognized. There are models around the world where education is highly respected. And I'm thinking of Asian societies, Scandinavian societies, where education is highly respected, highly rewarded. It's a status symbol to be a teacher in those societies.
Yes.
And this country needs to go a long distance to have that happen. I am so tired of hearing that public schools are broken, they're not doing their jobs. Of course, we could improve,
Yeah.
but 90% of America's kids are educated in the public system. And so we educate what society gives us.
Yeah.
Society gives us poverty kids, we educate them.
Yeah.
Society gives us kids with special needs, we educate them. Society gives us undocumented kids who can't read or write or have very low skills, and we educate them. That is an enormous challenge that by and large the society does not recognize nor reward, and it's far too easy to give lip service without the concrete resources necessary to change that system. So no real specifics on that answer, Anne, but those are
Yeah.
some of the big picture problems that I see need to be addressed.
Well, you raised such an important point. And to your point, Tony, I mean, if we think of some of those Asian societies, Singapore, South Korea, that invested 20 years, very focused on education, where can the disruption in the system happen to kind of shift that mindset and shift that
Yeah,
focus?
it's a good question. It will certainly take some extraordinary leadership from the federal level, the big picture level. Some disruption has occurred, and I have founded a very successful charter school in Santa Fe, the Monte del Sol Charter School, And I could tell you some stories of disruption that have happened as a result of that school here in Santa Fe and in New Mexico.
You can take us back in time to a particular example, the situation,
Sure.
paint a picture for us.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So when we moved, my family moved to Santa Fe in 1999. I moved here primarily because of my wife's career. She was a newly minted family physician who had gotten a wonderful position here in Santa Fe, and I did not. And I was happy to move here for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
In prior to that, I have had experience teaching and administering in the private system. I have had experience teaching in the public system, in the inner
Mm-hmm.
city in Portland, Oregon. I have had experience teaching and administering in the international school system. So I moved to Santa Fe with that as a background. I loved the organizational structures of private schools, of what we called independent schools.
Mm-hmm.
They're not connected to governments and most of the time not connected to any religious philosophy as well.
Mm-hmm.
I love them.
Mm-hmm.
What I didn't like about them is that they educated a small and exclusive sliver of society, and that always bothered me. I did not grow up in that milieu as an immigrant to this country. But the organizational flexibility, nimbleness, creativity, the sense of community that small schools developed, it was really a very high ethic in my professional career. So when we moved to Santa Fe in 1999, New Mexico had just passed this charter school law.
Yes.
Having come from Colorado, which was a big charter school state, I was familiar with it. And the opportunity emerged to say, I bet you we could create a public school that looks, feels, sounds, and runs itself as a private school, small, nimble, creative, innovative, community-minded, and have it be for public school kids. Once I started down that path, I knew that certainly a venture like this I could not do on my own.
Mm-hmm.
I began to assemble a team
Yeah.
of advisors in Santa Fe. And there was a time when it appeared that, yes, we could do this. And the notion of, oh goodness, an organizationally small school focused on the arts, which is big here in Santa Fe, focused on community, focused on getting kids out experientially into the community as part of their education, and
Yes.
all of that for public school kids.
Mm-hmm.
That was bell ringing. That was just that image
Mm-hmm.
spoke to me probably more than anything else in my career, and that was the driving force to decide to do that. And we did, and we were successful.
How did you pivot into that model? I mean, how can you just
Well, the charter school law has some requirements in it. I had the advantage of being the first one in secondary school in Santa Fe, so I helped develop some of the practicalities afterwards. And quite frankly, the overseers,
Yeah.
which is the state of New Mexico Public Education Department, didn't really have any infrastructure that said, here's how you do it. We did have to go through an application process. We did have to go demonstrate to the school district what our curricula will be, who is going to teach them. We did have to have certified teachers. We had to have scope and sequence and an evaluation plan. We had to have all of those things in place, and all of that is fine. But really what I was intent on establishing was strong community support for the idea.
Yeah.
So one of the advantages, in my opinion, of a charter school is that I developed a board of directors that was very representative of the Santa Fe community, who were very supportive of the concept that we put forward. And with that backing, the school district was quite impressed with what we had put together and said, let's do it. let's try this new school, this new entity. And so off we went. The
And
challenge,
sorry, who were the stakeholders? Because I think who do you bring to the table is often a very important part of
right.
how one can.
Yeah, I think there's some downsides to the entire charter school movement and concept, and I'm happy to talk about that. But in my particular experience, when I brought to the authorities this team that was behind me, it was an impressive team. And the
And who were they? Who did they represent? Was it the business community? Was it the
I
which?
had the president of the local community college on my team.
Mhm,
I had the chair of the College of Education of the College of Santa Fe on my team. I had the chief circuit judge for the state of New Mexico, who happened to be in Santa Fe, on my team.
mhm,
I had the educational outreach director of the Santa Fe Opera on my team.
mhm,
Good people,
mhm.
respectable people. I had the associate superintendent of schools on my team.
Can you take us through to how that sort of ended up? I mean, at what point did you define that this has been a success, and how did people respond and feel at that point in time?
The question of what do you determine success
Of course.
is a very difficult question to answer.
Mhm.
And it's a question that everyone would say, well, how do you know your school is going to work? And the answer is, well, we don't yet. We'll have to get some data to show that it does, and it will take some time to
Yeah.
show some data. The traditional measures are always there in the public system, and that, of course, is test scores.
Yes.
And we know the research that test scores are very poor indicators of success in life.
Mhm.
And the College Board, located in Princeton, could tell you that SAT scores are not the primary determiner of success in life.
Mhm.
And neither is where you go to college, the
Mhm.
determiner of success in life. It's a
Mhm.
whole panoply of attributes and skills and dispositions that come together to determine success in life. And
Of
that
course.
question is answered differently in different societies. You go to Denmark or Bhutan, and they'll say, well, happiness is our definition of success in life. You
Mhm.
go to America, and they'll say, how much money you make is the definition
Mhm.
of success in life. So it's a
But for your school, Tony, how did you define success, and how did you
right. So we define success as students moving on after they left our school to follow their passion and to do good in the world. And that required that we follow them.
yes.
And we didn't do as good a job as I would have liked to do.
Mhm.
It takes a development office or someone to follow through.
Of
What
course.
we did accomplish, however,
Yeah.
was a tremendous success in getting students into colleges and universities. And then, is that a success? Well, we put that in the success column.
Yeah.
But what we learned when we followed those students is that many of those students were the first in their families to go to college or universities, which is fabulous.
It is.
And if you break that cycle of nobody going to college and all of a sudden somebody going to college, what
Absolutely.
that means is that subsequent generations will follow that path and the cycle of poverty can be broken. So
Yeah.
that's very exciting. However, it wasn't lost on me that many of our early graduates who went to the local state institutions, University of New Mexico or New Mexico State University,
Yeah.
didn't finish. And we didn't do an official study, but I just have anecdotal data and conversations where students would tell us, you gave us such great attention at that school.
Yeah.
It felt like such a family and such a community, and you supported us and encouraged us and inspired us to go through. And then we go sit in a 500 student lecture hall
Yeah.
with a little figure in the front, and they walk back forth. And if there's disruption that needs to happen, I say disruption in the higher education system clearly needs to happen to engage kids and keep them in there. So How
Yeah.
do we gauge success? I would say we gauge success that way. Our test scores were fine. I don't think they burned them up. We had good success in test scores. The federal government in 2000 and when was it? When George Bush implemented or no, I think it was earlier, the No Child Left Behind system.
Hmm.
They dictated what success looks like. And you had to show in your test scores everybody making individual progress. That was extremely challenging because the federal government dictated everybody would be tested multiple times during the year,
Hmm.
and progress had to be made relative to those tests.
Yes.
And that was extremely challenging. But
Yeah.
anyway, um, so it's a complicated answer to a complicated question.
Yeah. But in terms of overall, Tony, in terms of the criteria for success that you established, and based on what you were able to track and measure, to what extent did you feel that that school had delivered on
I
its
do.
goals?
I think the school did deliver very, very well, and on multiple levels. Number one, the numbers of people that were clamoring to get into the school continued to increase year after year after year. The year that I left in 2008, we had a 10-to-1 ratio of applicants to positions available in that. Why is that? Why were
Sure.
people clamoring to get in there? We had established a very good reputation.
Hmm.
Number two, there are a number of graduates from that school that remain in the city of Santa Fe. And because we are a small community,
Yeah.
I bump into them occasionally. Just this morning, had one
Hmm.
who
Hmm.
is a professional dancer and actually gives dance classes online around the country and world. She has a specific type of dance that she does. And I asked her, tell me, remember we had a mentorship program
Yeah.
where we were out into the community, and that was your mentorship, wasn't it? She said, "Oh yes, yep. No, I liked all my academics, but my mentorship was in dance, and that's what spurred me forward." And I hear that story of students that are in the community doing this and that as a result of their mentorship program that we had established at the school. I left the school in 2008 and went overseas to direct an international school, the American School of Warsaw, Poland,
Yeah.
2008 to 2012, and returned
Hmm.
to Santa Fe in 2012. And at that point, I was asked to head the charter school division of the state of New Mexico.
Hmm.
Um, and what I saw there was interesting to me. And in Santa Fe, there was a charter school called the New Mexico School for the Arts
Okay.
that was born and flourishing and doing very well,
Hmm.
exclusively to develop career artists.
Hmm.
There were other arts schools around the state of New Mexico, the Public Academy for Performing Arts in Albuquerque, very successful school. There were a
Yeah.
number of schools that were focused on technology. There were a number of schools that were focused on educating the Native American population. That's all in the charter world. So what I saw was a tremendous amount of innovation
Hmm.
that the charter schools had birth. And in Santa Fe, I was asked in 2013 to investigate, or would I be interested in starting a new school here in Santa Fe, because my school, Monte del Sol School, other charter schools all had long waiting lists.
Yes.
And the new superintendent said, how comes we don't do something like that?
Hmm.
And so he was interested in the International Baccalaureate. I've had a lot of experience with the International Baccalaureate. So I said, yes, let's create another school, but I will have some demands. And yes, I'm happy to create an International Baccalaureate school, an IB school, but I want to ensure that I will have autonomy in who I hire.
Hmm.
Check. I want to have autonomy in admission into the school.
Mm-hmm.
Check. And I want to have control over my budget.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't a total check, but said, yes, you'll definitely have majority input.
Yeah.
That's a complicated thing. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. And
Okay.
that's what started the Mandela International Magnet School,
Mm-hmm.
which is an international baccalaureate school, the only international baccalaureate school in Santa Fe. And because of the success of the charter school that I had birthed years earlier,
Yeah.
we devised an admission system that ensured a diversity of students would apply to this school. We had
Mhm.
lottery setups in each of the 5 districts that represented the 5 school board members who sat on the Santa Fe school board. So district number 5 had X number of kids available in the lottery. District 4, 3,
I
2,
see.
1.
Yeah.
And so our school drew from students across the city, and therefore the name Magnet. But it's clear to me, and it's indisputable, that that school would not have existed without the other charter schools showing that this kind of education could really happen. So that, to me, is a huge success. The thing that I loved about the IB was its requirement that you think globally
Yes.
about what the purpose of your education is.
Mm-hmm.
It requires students to be generalists. You must choose courses in 6 different subject matter areas, the
Mm-hmm.
arts being one of them,
Yeah.
the math, science being others,
Mm-hmm.
language, humanities, all of it. It really creates a well-rounded youngster and a well-rounded educational system. And the linchpin to me is a course that I actually taught years ago called
Yeah.
TOK, which stands for Theory of Knowledge. Everyone has to take that course, which is designed to challenge how you think about things. How do you know what you know? How is this knowledge claim justified? How do
Interesting.
you know?
Yeah.
And there was a course that called Theory of Knowledge that required every IB student to take it
Yeah.
and pass it in order to receive the IB diploma. And that's just fantastic. All of us should ask that question.
Yeah.
How do we know what we know?
Yeah.
What causes our truth to
Yeah.
emerge? And
Yeah.
so the IB represents a terrific opportunity for education to happen in an extremely robust and, I would say, rigorous way. It's not for everybody because the academics are
Yeah.
quite rigorous, but I've had numerous, more than a few college admissions officers tell me,
Mm-hmm.
please send us kids with the IB diploma because they tend to be our better and best students.
Interesting.
And I was passionate about making the IB available to everyone. The reality is, it's not for everyone.
Sure.
And what we birthed in the charter school movement in Santa Fe and in New Mexico birthed also Mandela, but in the larger picture, okay, if you're not drawn to that global context of education in the IB, then you have other choices. You could go to a school for the arts, or you could go to Monte del Sol, which you'll get a mentorship program in. Also, the Santa Fe Public Schools created their own magnet, another type of magnet called Early College Opportunities, which was all about developing trades for those non strictly bookish college bound kids that
With
are
you.
dying to go to the Ivy Leagues. They could go and
Yeah.
learn sustainable agriculture and sustainable energy development.
Mm-hmm.
And that is also a magnet school.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I would argue would not be in existence had we not shown that these different models were available.
That's remarkable, Tony.
No, you're right, Anne, that for me, I first encountered Nelson Mandela's story when I was a young teacher in a private school in Portland, Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, I saw posters popping up around our school. I was a, 26-year-old teacher at the time. And the poster said Free Mandela. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't even know who Mandela was.
Yeah.
And there was a group of high school students who were very politically savvy who latched on to this idea of freeing Nelson Mandela. And that I then became part of that group
Mm-hmm.
of students and teachers who took that on as a cause and learned more about Nelson Mandela. And once I left that school, that image of Nelson Mandela stayed with me. And of course, I knew that he was working extremely hard to end apartheid. I was part of the um, sanctioning movement in the US and elsewhere towards South Africa during the apartheid period, and remain sort of on the sidelines all the way through, learning about that whole system and sanctions and what could pressure be brought to bear to end it, et cetera, et cetera. I would say that for me, Mandela's stature just rocketed to another level in, was it 1991 that he was released?
It was February the 11th, 1990.
1990, February
Yeah.
11th. And then I
Yeah.
remember there was a tremendous buzz among my professional friends, my personal friends,
Yeah.
that this was going to happen. And we all crowded around the television, just waiting for him to speak. And that speech on that balcony
Yeah.
um,
In
was
Cape Town.
was spine tingling moment. So,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, this guy is more than just a face on a poster fighting for something that so many other people have fought for, et cetera, et cetera. He elevated himself at that moment. And then he just sort of became an emotional hero to me
Yeah.
at that moment. I would say, Anne, that once I became a school leader for the first time in 1986, when I
Yes.
was 32 years old, as the head of the upper school of this international school, Nido de Águilas in Santiago, Chile, I became deeply interested in leadership.
Yes.
How does it happen? How does it work? Nobody ever taught me how to be a leader. Nobody ever enrolled me in a course, Leadership 101, 201, 301. Here's your degree.
Yeah.
How does it work? How does it happen? It's all serendipitous, and you
Yeah.
all look for models and see what happens. And of course, there are theories, and where you are, people like Ronald Heifetz and others who have devoted their entire professional life to studying leadership have a lot to say about that. And I started reading about all those things and in the corporate world. And it was extremely interesting to me because I had assumed a leadership position, and it was challenging. It was very challenging as a young educator.
Yes.
And Nelson kept popping up in my rear view mirror and in my front view mirror. Here was somebody who was exercising leadership on such a grand scale in his country,
Yeah.
to take all of the divestment movement that was happening around the world and use it in a way that didn't destroy society, but used it to elevate society. And oh man, I was just totally captivated. We have numerous examples in the history of the world, including the world that my parents went through, which was through the Second World War and through the world of communist Poland afterwards, where one system would come in and destroy the other system.
Yeah.
And of course, say we have the right answer and you have the wrong answer. And what Nelson did to me was not that. And it was remarkable the way he maneuvered his role, his ethos, his supporters, and his lack of supporters to eventually bring down the apartheid system. And there are many people that could speak more eloquently, and you included, about Mandela's life. But for me as a leader, who was interested to say, how do things happen here? What's the theory here? Just watching him, I think that there are moments in history when certain geniuses arrive that are not taught, that just happen. Be they musical geniuses, be they athletic geniuses, be they mathematical geniuses, be they the Steve Hawkings of the world or the Albert Einsteins. And I think Mandela falls in that category. Nobody taught him how to do that. He just had the incredible plethora of skills to pull it off. And all of it, in my view, I mean, certainly he had the intellectual skills. He was an attorney.
Yeah, he was. And he also had remarkable mentors as a child. And, so they were, when you speak about mentors and stuff, I mean, I don't want to take away from his absolute genius, but he didn't do it alone.
Right.
And, he had incredible mentors and people in his life who shaped him and taught him,
Definitely.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, when you made the point around the fact that, like so many other systems where one system comes in and completely destructs another, you made the point that, in fact, despite disinvestment, it wasn't a destructive element. Can you share just a little more about what you mean by that in terms of how
sure,
investment and translated that into something that was positive and ended up building South Africa?
I think the lesson that Mandela brought to the world was a lesson that rarely occurs in the world, and why he's so inspirational to me as a leader and as a human being. And that is, I mean, the world knows very well his ability to forgive, and that cannot be understated. But I remember reading Richard Engel's biography, Long Walk to Freedom, and there was a chapter when
when you say Richard Engel, I mean, you talk about the fact that he helped Mandela. He wrote the biography for.
That's right. He and Nelson Mandela co-wrote Nelson's biography or autobiography.
Yeah, Long Walk to Freedom. That's right. Because Richard wrote subsequent books,
Correct. But Mandela also allowed him to follow him throughout his journey.
Yeah.
And there was that one scene in the book where de Klerk and his cronies are sitting watching Mandela on television.
You're talking about President de Klerk, the then president of the apartheid government.
Correct. The then white Afrikaner president, F.W. de Klerk, and his cabinet were sitting around, as was the entire nation and world, watching this television of Mandela giving his speech. And I can't remember whether it was the speech after he was released from prison or another one during the campaign or whatever, but it wasn't, or it was de Klerk who turned to his cabinet and said, "You think you can work with this guy?" And just that question was an indicator to me that Mandela was labeled a terrorist. The entire South African white apparatus was out to get him and to kill him, in addition to arrest him. He was enemy number one, 27 years in prison. And through his magic, he's got these white rulers even asking the question, well, what do you think? Could you
Mhm.
work with this guy? And some of us said, yeah, I think I could. I mean,
Yeah.
that is totally inspirational and
Yes.
totally, where else in the world has that happened? I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm ignorant. So I'd love to learn where else in that world.
Well, it's such an interesting question, Tony, because one of my professors at Harvard at the Kennedy School was saying to me that, truly Mandela, and when you think about it, he has been the only leader of a liberation movement that transitioned into presidency and was able to unite and heal a nation. That's
Yeah. And
the world.
as we learn more about leadership skills, it is like nailing jello to the wall. There's no formula.
Mhm.
There's just examples of a body of knowledge that I think we can rely on. And one of the things that comes through for me was his tremendous emotional intelligence,
Yes.
even more than his intellectual intelligence. He
Mhm.
was a bright man, no question.
Mhm.
Incredibly skilled in logical argument formation,
Mhm.
but he was incredibly skilled in his logical argument formation because he knew what
Mhm.
would resonate with his audience. He had that emotional connection to know what would resonate without sacrificing his own ethical being.
Mhm.
Now, I say that in my view, without sacrificing his own ethical makeup, certainly before he went to prison. After he came out, and then you have to decide how you're going to transition into the world of political leadership. You do have to make compromises, and you
Yes.
do have to sometimes swallow your hard fought ethical stances. And he had that remarkable ability to do that and to know to what degree he could do that and get away with it in order for it to be effectual. Just remarkable leadership skills. It's
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I guess the question, Tony, I mean, sitting around the world today, we really are in a pivotal moment of chaos and complexity. And even here in the USA, I mean, do you think Mandela's leadership is relevant for this time and this nation, not only this nation, but in the world today?
yeah, it's kind of a, excuse me for saying so, Anne, but that's a slam dunk question.
And how is it
Well,
relevant?
because, and I don't think this moment is unique, but every moment is unique.
Yeah.
Uh, and Mandela, he came out February 11th, 1990.
Mhm.
Whether that was February 11th, 1890, would have been incredibly relevant.
Mhm.
And whether it was February 11th, 1790, would have been incredibly
But I
relevant.
guess, I mean, the reason why I asked that question, Tony, is that, as we know, leadership is often contextual. And so, as the world has changed, and of course it's changed a lot, and he was voted by the BBC as the leader of leaders of the 20th century. But some may say, well, that belongs in the 20th century, times have changed. So what would you say to those people?
No, I agree. I think he's a leader for the ages. What I was getting at, though, Anne, is that he's a leader for all ages, that
I'm
his
with you.
leadership would have been effective no matter when he came upon the scene. And
Mhm.
of course, if he comes upon the scene today, oh my gosh, we'd all be just wonderful. But having gone through the 60s and 70s in the United States, had he emerged then, we would have said the same thing. And so my point is that his leadership model and his leadership skills are one for the ages. And
I'm
it
with
is
you.
contextual, of
Yeah.
course, but I could see him thriving in any era, quite frankly.
Yeah. So on that point, I mean, maybe this is a tough question, but given this incredible deep divide in America today, and of course, America's for so long been that beacon of hope for modern democracies in the world, including South Africa, Tony. I mean, America truly was, as South Africa our beacon of hope for the world, for South Africa. What do you think Mandela would say to the leaders of America today?
I think Mandela would recognize that there's an inherent tension between the individual and a community.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take a school
Yeah.
as an example. And we hammered the notion of community in the school on the theory that all individuals need to thrive and that we could thrive as part of a community. So when Mandela adopts the old and ancient Ubuntu concept of I am because we are,
Yeah.
That is, it's not a trivial statement. And look at where we are, and the balance in this country, in my opinion, really started to shift way back when I mean the tension in this country has always been there. When Roosevelt took on the New Deal and he was emphasizing the health of the community,
Yeah.
was the individual wealth owners that really fought back. And
Mm-hmm.
that tension can be healthy. That tension can help each other. There's no question. I lived in a society where the community was so dominant that it destroyed the individual. And that's called communism, as it was exercised by the Soviet communism, which is just, in my opinion, awful. But let's take your other example. Suppose the individual is raised to such a high degree of value that the community is suffering. Well, I fear that that's what's happening in our country, that the health of
Yeah.
our community. So that's the message that is timeless.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Mandela would have the wonderful ability to know where that balance is, where that proper, healthy balance between the ability of the individual to be innovative and creative and
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurial and achieve and have some dreams and achieve them,
Mm-hmm.
and that community would be healthy along the way. These are not either or propositions. That
Sure.
Mandela would be able to take his entire cultural background
Mm-hmm.
and make that happen. How he would do that, I can't tell you, but I know
Yeah.
that as a leader, he would have the spiritual energy
Mm-hmm.
behind him to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that message would help quell the current tension and conflicts in America today?
No, I do not,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that what I would also hope that Mandela would do is engage our country in a community dialogue, in a
Mm-hmm.
conversation about what that means. I think that there is an element in our country that anytime you talk about elevating the health of the community, it's this maker-taker argument. You're either a maker or a taker. You
Yeah.
either make jobs and businesses happen, or everyone else is a taker and sort of parasitic and sucking life out of
Mm-hmm.
that. And I think there would be a population in our country that would hear Mandela say that, and he'd say, he's a taker. He just wants us to make things so that he can take it. So he would have to somehow construct a society of conversations, a series of conversations
Mm-hmm.
of education, so that people could realize that it's not an either or, it's a both
Yeah.
end. You can thrive, and you can thrive even more if this thrives.
Absolutely.
But I
Absolutely.
don't think it would happen
Yeah.
automatically.
Yeah. So turning to the world at large, what do you think? We know that Mandela, Madibas, we call him, loved children. And, he truly missed children, and he always believed in the youth and the youth being our future. What do you think Mandela would say today, Tony, to the children of the world?
I think that he would take the concept of Ubuntu
Mm-hmm.
and translate it to kids' language.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kids resonate with that. My experience is that kids love being a part of a team, being a part of a community,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that they have support
Mm-hmm.
from the community. That is kid ethos and language. And
Yeah.
my experience has mostly been in middle schools and high schools.
Yeah.
Middle schools in particular, I love
Mm-hmm.
that concept. High schools already, they start to individuate and go on, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that message of Mandela's would resonate deeply with kids.
Mm-hmm. And could you share perhaps a couple of things from your amazing experience, not only founding the Mandela International Magnet School in Santa Fe, but even your ongoing involvement for the school? You know, what are, based on your experience and teaching the Mandela leadership philosophy and way of life and leadership, what takeaways are there for us around
Yeah.
that education?
Well, I'll talk about what I think you're aware of, and right, that there are New Mexico state standards that need to be followed in every public school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Mandela International Magnet School is a 7 through 12 IB school. It is certified for MYP, Middle Years Program, and DP, Diploma Program.
Mm-hmm.
Um, However, the innovative teachers there have decided that the ethos of Mandela is so important and such an opportunity
Yeah.
that we need to institutionalize it even further. The ethos of Mandela is so powerful. The school is named after Mandela. And schools search for ways to say, okay, how can we make this real? So these teachers are now instituting a entry level course for seventh graders. This will be their first year coming into the school.
Mm-hmm.
And all students will take this social studies class based on the life, philosophy, ethos, and spirit of Nelson Mandela within the context of meeting New Mexico state social studies standards. I think it's a highly innovative idea and
Yeah.
a way of instituting the spirit and ethos of why the school is named after Mandela
Yeah.
into middle school kids. Now, I know what some of the criticism will be already, and we see it in school boards around the country that
Mm-hmm.
are reacting irrationally
Mm-hmm.
to critical race theory or content. And you cannot teach any. The state of Texas apparently has these awful guidelines that prohibit teachers
Yeah.
from criticizing anything bad about the history of the United States. It sounds to me like Soviet Union, but we can teach models of where it has been successful. And since the school is named after Mandela, this is wholly appropriate to learn the context in which Mandela lived, including his Xhosa upbringing, including the apartheid system, including the leadership skills that he developed, including all of that. It makes for terrific introductory semester class in social studies. And it's extremely relevant in New Mexico, as
Yeah.
indigenous populations are also clamoring for
Mm-hmm.
their own voice
Mm-hmm.
in leadership and content. So I think that's just a great movement on their part.
Mm-hmm. And do you think this is appropriate only for schools named after Nelson Mandela, or do you think it has broader relevance?
No, I do not. Clearly, everybody is searching for. Well, I think we need to stop and ask the question: what is the point of education? Which is the
Yeah.
fundamental question that I asked in forming both of my schools. Why are we doing this?
Mm-hmm.
What's
Mm-hmm.
the point?
Mm-hmm.
There are schools out there. Why are we creating another one?
Yeah.
What's the driving energy behind it, really?
Of course. Of course.
And it's not an easy question to answer. It's sort of asking, what's the point of education? Well, we answered it in our own way.
Mm-hmm.
So not all schools or educators are going to answer it my way, but we answered it in this tension between the individual and community. We want you to follow your passion. We want you to follow your bliss. We are going to educate you with the skills necessary
Mhm,
to follow your passion and follow your skills in the main. We
mhm,
will meet the state standards, etc., and we will encourage you to follow your passion and your bliss.
mhm.
Um, that is a high degree of a vision for education, what that means.
Oh,
And the purpose of it is you take that passion and your bliss for the good of society
yeah,
because you develop your individual skills and you work for the health of the community. It's in our view, a winning combination.
yeah,
So other schools, they may not take the lesson of Nelson Mandela, although we could argue they should, but they could take the ethos of we exist because we are, the spirit of Ubuntu, translated in their own words,
yeah.
and do their own deal for that purpose. I couldn't tell them what to do. I wouldn't want to mandate it at all. I do think that the best way to disseminate these things is to show their success,
Of course,
to get some evidence of success,
of
and
course.
to inspire others, which is what Mandela did,
Yeah,
inspire others to follow. And that's
absolutely.
the best example of leadership rather than mandating it or say you will do this or that.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. Tony, just a couple more questions, but you alluded earlier in terms of some of the challenges for higher ed. I mean, in terms of the big leadership challenges in the world today, for you, what stands out as perhaps one or two of the biggest challenges, and what do you think higher ed needs to be doing differently to meet this moment to help those potential leaders be developed to take on these big challenges in the world?
Um, I think as an organization, higher ed strikes me as trying to turn around an ocean liner with a few tugboats. It's extremely slow.
Mhm,
There's all kinds of things in higher education that contribute to that inertia.
mhm,
One could argue about tenure track professors who don't really care about innovation, who have been
mhm,
teaching the same things year in, year out, and are just fine
mhm,
doing so. Um, but I do think that what technology has done to our society
mhm.
is that if you put change on an XY graph and you just graph it along, and then where is that inflection point that made the exponential curve just shoot straight up? And the graph is one of change in society.
Mhm,
Technology is right in there in that inflection point. It's a
mhm,
tremendous driver.
mhm,
Has higher ed really adapted to that?
mhm,
I don't think so. I
mhm,
do worry that there is every year less and less um, liberal arts candidates going to schools. I
mhm,
don't think higher ed has ever made the case for why that continues to be important. I do think it's extremely important, but
mhm,
they need to get on it and say, in addition to this change happening, here's why liberal education is so important.
mhm,
So I think higher ed needs to be far more nimble, far more flexible,
mhm.
need to get away from 4-year degree programs and perhaps begin to institute certificates in a
Yeah.
particular skill level that allows young people to be more fluid. Perhaps the old traditional 4-year college degree isn't as valuable as it needs to be anymore.
Mhm,
I do think community colleges will play an increasingly important role in producing. I know here in Santa Fe we have a fabulous program in sustainable energy development. You
mhm,
can get a certificate in solar panel management and installation. You can get a certificate in sustainable agriculture. These are emerging fields that will be there for the next few decades. And when
mhm,
that passes and another field in there, community colleges are much more nimble to provide that sort of training. And I think higher ed really needs to revamp that way. I do think that I think the Ivies, maybe the sub Ivies, they're going to be fine.
Yeah.
But there's an army of other colleges out there that are struggling, and they're going to continue to struggle unless they begin to adapt.
And in your mind, what do you think what stands out for you as the biggest leadership challenges at this point in time? Just one or two that are top of mind for you.
I think managing the rapidity of change in our society is more and more rising to the top. But if you put that as managing the rapidity of change, then you have subcategories. One category, cultural demographics, the rapidity of change of cultural demographics.
Yeah.
Another subcategory, the need to emerging industries. How do you educate we used to say this all the time to eighth graders, 70% of the jobs that they're going to encounter when they graduate from college don't exist today. How do you educate for that? It's going to take, leadership is going to take the ability to see that, and to create systems that are rigorous mentally and emotionally and physically. And I think that the old liberal arts education that cultivates the arts, that cultivates the mathematics and science, that cultivates history and language and the power of the word isn't going to go away. But we need systems that do a better job to show kids how to integrate it all, because that is what spawns innovation, that kind of left brain, right brain, multiple brain thinking. So that's a tall order for a leader.
Well, an army of leaders. Yes.
I'll say one more thing, that a leader doesn't have to do that.
Yes.
A leader just has to see it.
Yeah.
And have the inspiration and the vision to get a critical mass of people to do it.
Of course, through and with others, always. As we say in Africa, Tony, it takes a village to raise a child. It's about building the stakeholders, building the coalitions. Just a couple of lighter questions. You've had a really interesting childhood. I know you come from an immigrant family. What is your happiest childhood memory?
Oh gosh, I have so many. I was blessed by wonderful parents. We did not have a lot. We were in the lower socioeconomic level initially. We did enter the middle class. My gosh. And so my happiest, I don't know if I have a happiest, but I have very happy memories of playing baseball.
Okay.
Extremely happy memories of just feeling grounded and comfortable with kids in my neighborhood.
Which neighborhood?
It was a neighborhood in West Reading, Pennsylvania, where I grew up.
Yeah.
Very, very middle class, Norman Rockwell kind of middle class. Yeah, no, that was a very, very happy childhood. I was extremely happy with my family. I think the celebrations that my Polish parents brought with them, the traditions around Christmas, Easter, all of that, I like. I taught our children the power of ritual, not necessarily religious ones, but established rituals in your lives and in their lives. Build community. My parents were strong members of the community. All of that were great formations in my life.
What is one of your memorable rituals that you have passed on to your children?
Well, any Pole will know that there is this tradition around Christmas time. It's called opłatek. It's it looks like a communion wafer, but it's not consecrated. It's just a similar kind of wafer. And on Christmas Eve, everybody gets a piece of it and go around to everyone else and make a wish for them in the future for the coming year. And whenever we have a dinner together on Christmas Eve with lots of people, everyone gets a piece. It takes about an hour to get around to everybody and do that. But afterwards, everybody feels, oh, how nice, how wonderful. And my children still do that.
That's wonderful. And one last question around that. What is your favorite quote?
Education is the most powerful weapon we have to change the world.
By Nelson Mandela.
And I have another one, and it comes from a nonprofit in which on whose board I sit. It is, an enemy is someone whose story I do not yet know.
Who said that? Do you know?
It's a tagline of our organization. It's called tomorrowswomen.org.
Okay.
I don't know who the author is. Thank you, Anne. Thank you for your good work.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Nelson Mandela once said that education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. It begs two profound questions. The first, what, why, and how do we educate our children for tomorrow? The second question flows from the first. To what extent do we focus our children's education on personal accomplishment for self, on community flourishment for others, and on global enlightenment for our current global context and challenges? Or perhaps a balanced combination of the three. Listening to my good friend Tony Gerlicz, who is an admired educator and administrator of public and private schools in the USA and abroad, and the founder of the Mandela International Magnet School in Santa Fe, New Mexico, helps us better understand the critical importance of educating our children in a way that we create a healthy tension and a balance between the three. The late Dr. Steve Biko, who was the leader of the Black Consciousness Movement and who died in police detention in 1977 in South Africa, famously once said that the great powers of the world have done wonders to give the world a more military and an industrial look. But the great gift has yet to come from Africa, to give the world a more human face. Ubuntu is an ancient African word. It's an African cultural philosophy, and it is a unique approach to humanity that teaches us about our interconnected humanity and destiny. Ubuntu gives the world a more human face. It also teaches us that it is an interconnectedness in such a way that no single individual, group, or tribe can sustain their success at the expense of another. Nelson Mandela learned about Ubuntu from his elders, from his Utembu tribe, and from his caretakers and mentors. Ubuntu underpinned Mandela's core values and beliefs and was a powerful lever in his audacity to change. Ubuntu shaped the way Mandela presented himself at his famous 1964 trial in Rivonia. And I quote, "I have fought against white domination and I have fought against black domination." Ubuntu explained why Mandela kept his prison warder, Christo Brandt, close to him, in and out of prison, which he recorded in his autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom. And I quote, "Mr. Brandt reinforced my belief in the essential humanity, even of those who had put me behind bars." Ubuntu also emboldened Mandela in his determination and commitment to create a government of national unity and to bring friends and foes alike together in a new democracy to ensure that everybody had a seat at the table. As we tackle these big, bold challenges in the world, like climate, artificial intelligence, and international cybersecurity hacks, and when we empower and develop our youth, it's critical that we find that healthy tension and balance for them to develop a strong sense of self, a healthy sense of interconnectedness with others, and to adapt to this big, global, complex, and challenging world. When we educate our children to give the world a more human face, in so doing, we can help them meet this critical global moment. So until next time, Umuntu, Ingumuntu, Ingabantu, I am because we are. Ubuntu can help you and your children transform yourself, change your nation, and galvanize the world. So until next time, take care and take thoughtful, bold action.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leading Boldly into the Future. Please find links and connections mentioned in this show in our blog and never miss an episode by subscribing at anne-pratt.com. That's ANNE-PRATT.com. May these insights from inspiring industry leaders, remarkable disruptors, and courageous champions of change bring forth a brand new you, emboldened, empowered, and ready to inspire hope. Come back soon, share with your friends, sign up on anne-pratt.com and join our movement for change. Why? Because the world needs you to lead boldly too.